Carl Jung revealed the 6 types of people who secretly drain you. There's a strange kind of exhaustion we all feel, sometimes not the kind that comes from physical labor or a long day of work, but something more subtle. A weight that seems to settle in the mind, a kind of invisible fatigue that lingers even after rest. It's the feeling of being emotionally hollowed out, spiritually depleted, like something essential inside you has been quietly siphoned away. And here's the truth that most people never see. That feeling often comes not from what you're doing, but from who you're around. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and depth psychologist, didn't just explore the architecture of the psyche, he also gave us tools to understand the energy dynamics between people. He didn't use the word drain in the way we do today, but his work on archetypes, projections, the shadow, and psychic energy revealed something powerful, that some people, without even knowing it, feed off others. And unless we learn to see them clearly, we become their unconscious fuel. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been around someone who didn't insult you, didn't hurt you, didn't even do anything overtly negative, but somehow, after spending time with them, you felt smaller, less clear, less alive? You laughed, you nodded, you played the role. But when you got home, it felt like your soul needed a nap. That wasn't just your imagination. That was psychic energy being drained. And Jung believed that understanding this energy, how it's exchanged, stolen, and conserved, is essential for living a conscious life.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's start with the first type of drainer, the one Jung might associate with the persona-addicted performer. This is the person who is completely identified with their social role. To them, image is everything. They're not trying to be malicious, but their entire identity is a mask, a performance. And when you're around them, you're subtly pulled into their script. You feel like you have to match their energy, play along, keep up. It's like being in a show you didn't audition for. Jung warned us about the danger of the persona. When a person becomes the mask, they lose access to their deeper self. And when they're empty inside, they unconsciously try to fill that void through others. The energy drain isn't from conflict, it's from disconnection. You're not connecting with a soul, you're connecting with a costume. And your psyche knows that, even if you don't. The second type is what we might call the shadow projector. This is someone who hasn't faced their own darkness, so they unconsciously cast it onto others. Around them, you feel defensive, confused, or even guilty, but you can't quite figure out why. Jung's theory of the shadow explains this perfectly. When people repress traits they don't want to admit, jealousy, anger, arrogance, they start to see those traits in others. Not because they're really there, but because the psyche can't hold the tension of denial forever. So it leaks. And if you're the nearest emotional sponge, you'll absorb that projection. Being around a shadow projector makes you feel like you're walking on emotional eggshells. Your boundaries blur, their unclaimed pain becomes your burden. And unless you have done shadow work, you'll carry that pain without even knowing it's not yours. Then we have the emotional historian, the person who is always stuck in the past. This isn't just someone who reminisces. This is someone whose identity is rooted in unresolved wounds, and who, rather than healing them, uses them as emotional leverage. Their stories are often heartbreaking, but over time you notice a pattern. They retell their pain not to process it but to recycle it, and you become the container. Jung believed that the unconscious repeats what it cannot integrate. So when someone hasn't metabolized their trauma, they look for others to hold it for them. The drain here is subtle but constant. You feel like you're always providing emotional oxygen, but they never seem to breathe on their own. Here's the question that cuts deep. How much of your exhaustion is really yours, and how much of it is inherited from the people you allow inside your energetic field? We're trained to be polite, to be kind, to listen. But what if politeness is costing you your vitality? What if kindness without boundaries is just self-sacrifice in disguise? The fourth type is the chronic validator. At first, they seem harmless, even friendly. They live for approval and they seek it constantly. But their need for reassurance is bottomless. They compliment you, but only so you'll return the favor. They open up, but only to be affirmed. Conversations with them feel like emotional bartering. And slowly, your energy shifts from connection to caretaking. Jung might say this person is stuck in the child archetype, unable to self-soothe, constantly seeking validation from the parent figure in others. If you're empathic, you'll feel compelled to rescue them. But the more you give, the more they require. And over time, you're not just drained, you're emotionally bankrupt. Fifth, we meet the chaos magnet. This person is always in crisis, always overwhelmed, always surrounded by drama. And if you're near them, you get pulled into the whirlwind. Jung wrote about psychological complexes, clusters of emotion-charged ideas that dominate the psyche. The chaos magnet is often trapped in a complex of victimhood or martyrdom. They don't want solutions, they want sympathy, but not the nourishing kind, the draining kind. The kind that demands your presence, your time, your attention, but never leads to growth. Being around them is like carrying water in a bucket with holes. No matter how much you pour in, it's never enough. And finally, there's the false mirror. This one is the most deceptive. They reflect back what they think you want to see. They mimic your interests, your values, your language. At first, it feels like resonance, but eventually it starts to feel hollow, because there's no real self behind the reflection, just echoes. Jung would say this person is disconnected from their individuation process. They haven't found their own identity, so they steal bits from others. And when you realize that, it's disorienting. You start to question your own authenticity. You wonder, if they're mirroring me, then who am I when I'm with them? That kind of energetic confusion is deeply draining. It's not just your energy they're taking, it's your sense of self. Understanding these 6 types isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. Jung taught us that what we do not make conscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. So the real question is, which of these types have you allowed in, and more importantly, which ones still live inside you? The invisible contract, why we let draining people in, and how Jung's shadow theory explains it all. The most haunting truth about the people who drain us is this: we invite them in. Not always consciously, not because we're weak, but because on some level deep within the architecture of our psyche, we need them. Or rather, we need what they reflect back to us. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He taught us that the unconscious isn't just a basement of suppressed memories, it's a living, dynamic force that shapes our behaviors, our relationships, even our fates. And this unconscious mind is constantly making secret agreements with others. These are the invisible contracts, silent, unwritten deals between 2 psyches. And more often than not, these contracts are forged in the shadow. Let's take a hard look at this. Why do we let the persona-addicted performer into our lives? Why do we tolerate the shadow projector, the chaos magnet, the chronic validator? The obvious answer is empathy, or perhaps obligation. But the deeper answer lies in Jung's concept of the shadow self, the parts of us we deny, suppress, or disown. When we reject traits in ourselves, we become magnetized to people who embody those very traits. Not because we like them, but because our psyche wants balance. It wants wholeness. And it will keep pulling those qualities into our field until we integrate them internally. For example, if you pride yourself on being humble, grounded, real, you may find yourself strangely fascinated by someone who is all image and performance. They annoy you, sure, but they also trigger something. And that trigger is a mirror. It's not saying you should become like them. It's saying that perhaps you've disowned the part of you that wants to be seen, admired, celebrated. The persona-addicted performer drains you because they're over-identified with visibility, while you're under-identified with it. Your imbalance plus their imbalance equals psychic tension. And that tension is the leak. That's where the energy drains out. And what about the shadow projector? The one who makes you feel like you're always in the wrong, even when you've done nothing wrong. The obvious move is to distance yourself. But Jung invites us to ask a deeper question. Why does this person's projection stick to me? Why does it land? The answer is tough, because part of you believes it. Part of you still carries guilt, shame, or self-doubt that matches their projection. So instead of rejecting it, your unconscious accepts it. That's the invisible contract. You carry my pain, and I'll carry your approval. You absorb my projection, and I'll keep you close. But that closeness is toxic. It's not intimacy, it's enmeshment. The emotional historian is no different. We think we're helping. We think we're being kind. But what if our attraction to their wounds is just a reflection of our own unhealed ones? What if we're unconsciously using their pain to avoid our own? As long as we're focused on fixing them, we don't have to confront the ache that lives inside us. That's the contract. I'll be the healer if you stay the broken one. But healing doesn't happen in that dynamic, it just perpetuates the cycle. And the chaos magnet. Let's be brutally honest, sometimes we let them in because their chaos distracts us from our own emptiness. Their drama is a convenient excuse not to face our silence. Their emergencies give our lives urgency. Our own sense of purpose becomes tied to their dysfunction. It feels noble. It feels compassionate. It's not. It's self-abandonment masquerading as service. That's the contract. I'll be your rescuer if you let me avoid myself. Jung never told us to cut people off. He told us to see them clearly. And in seeing them, we begin to see ourselves. Every draining relationship is a classroom. Every energy leak is a pointer to the unconscious. The goal isn't to demonize the other, it's to reclaim the parts of us that gave them power in the first place. So here's the philosophical gut punch. What if the people who drain you are actually doing you a favor? What if they are the unconscious messengers of your own fragmentation? What if, instead of running from them, you leaned in not to be drained again, but to retrieve the lost parts of yourself that you gave away? Because the truth is, no one can drain you unless you hand them the hose. No one can steal your energy unless you leave the door unlocked. The real work isn't boundary setting. That's a surface-level solution. The real work is shadow integration. It's going into the dark corners of your psyche and saying, I see you. I own you. You belong. Because once you reclaim what you've disowned, the contracts dissolve. The projections evaporate. The draining stops. The mirror and the mask. How Jung's archetypes reveal the truth about your relationships. We all wear masks. It's part of being human. Jung called this the persona, the face we show to the world, carefully crafted to be accepted, to belong, to function in society. But the danger comes when we start believing that the mask is who we are. And even more dangerously, when we start choosing relationships based on how well they reflect back our mask instead of how deeply they mirror our true self. This is where Jung's archetypes become not just symbolic ideas, but practical lenses to decode our interactions. Because every person who enters your life is either reflecting your truth or reinforcing your illusion. Let's start with the lover. This archetype isn't just about romance, it's about passion, connection, and vulnerability. When someone drains you through this archetype, it's often because they awaken a longing in you that you've suppressed. You may fall into relationships where you give too much, love too hard, attach too quickly, not because they're your soulmate, but because they activate a part of you that feels starved. The lover archetype, when cast in shadow, becomes the obsessive or the addict. And when you meet someone who mirrors that shadow, your energy won't just leak, it will flood toward them. You'll confuse emotional hunger with chemistry. You create a story of soul connection when it's really just two incomplete selves trying to become whole through each other. And that illusion is the mask, the one that says, I need you to feel real. Now look at the caregiver. This archetype lives in everyone who wants to help, to nurture, to heal. It shows up in friendships, family roles, even workplaces. But when the caregiver is out of balance, it becomes the martyr. And here's where draining relationships take root. You might find yourself always being the strong one, the stable one, the one who listens more than they speak. You think it's love, but it's a contract. I will carry your pain if you don't abandon me. That's not connection. That's dependency in disguise. And it's often rooted in a childhood wound somewhere. You learned that your worth comes from utility, not presence. So you attract people who need fixing, and they drain you because you never learned how to receive. The mask of the caregiver hides the truth of the neglected self. And then we meet the warrior archetype, the part of you that fights for what matters, sets boundaries, protects the sacred. In its shadow, it becomes the controller, the aggressor, or the victim. If you've disowned your inner warrior, you'll attract people who dominate you, or people who need you to fight all their battles. Either way, you lose energy. Why? Because you're outsourcing your power. You're either overextending in defense of others, or shrinking to avoid confrontation. Jung would remind us, every archetype is a mirror. If you're drained in a relationship, it means one of your archetypes is either being overplayed or undernourished. And the only way to restore balance is to reclaim it consciously. Here's something that cuts deeper than most people are willing to admit. What if you're maintaining a draining relationship not because of love, but because of identity? What if you've built a version of yourself around being needed, admired, feared, or accepted so much so that letting go of that relationship would feel like losing yourself? That's how the mask becomes a prison. You keep performing, keep giving, keep tolerating, not because it's right, but because you're afraid of what life looks like without that role. Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And sometimes the thing we do is stay in relationships that drain us, just so we don't have to ask, who am I without this? So what's the way out? Not blame, not bitterness, but integration. You confront the mask, you thank it for its service, and then you dare to remove it. You look at the people in your life and ask not just, do they love me? But do they see me beyond the mask? Do they nourish the parts of me that are real or just the parts that are useful to them? And even harder, do I do the same to others? Because if you want to stop being drained, you must stop draining yourself by pretending. You must stop curating your identity for safety and start expressing your essence for truth. And when that shift happens, something miraculous occurs. The people who fed off your false self will fade, and the ones who resonate with your real self will appear. The liberation of self, how energy, boundaries, and inner truth set you free from draining relationships. Freedom doesn't begin when someone leaves your life. It begins when you stop abandoning yourself. This is perhaps the deepest realization Carl Jung leads us toward, not just the awareness of who others are, but the courage to face who we've become in response to them. Draining relationships don't just happen because someone takes too much, they happen because somewhere along the line we believed we had nothing worth keeping for ourselves. And so we gave, not out of abundance, but out of fear, not out of love, but out of the need to be needed. The path to liberation is not paved with confrontation, it's paved with clarity. To reclaim your energy, you first have to understand what energy is. It's not just physical stamina or mood. Energy, in a deeper Jungian sense, is the life force that animates your psyche. It's your attention, your presence, your emotional bandwidth, your creative fire. Wherever your energy flows, your life follows. So when you keep pouring that energy into dynamics that don't reciprocate, don't elevate, don't reflect your truth, you're not just tired. You're slowly erasing yourself. The first act of liberation is to pay attention to where your energy goes and ask why. Jung emphasized the importance of boundaries not as walls, but as expressions of self-respect. A boundary is not a punishment, it's a declaration of value. It says, I recognize my limits, my needs, my truth, and I honor it. Most draining relationships persist because you've taught the other person that your needs are negotiable, that your silence is consent, that your presence is unconditional, even when your soul is collapsing. But every time you abandon your truth to keep the peace, you create an inner war. And that war is exhausting. Think about this. Where in your life are you saying yes while your body screams no? Where do you smile while your spirit shrinks? These micro-abandonments accumulate. They become patterns, and patterns become identity. Until one day you no longer remember who you were before you became a caretaker, a performer, a peacekeeper. Liberation begins when you start saying no, not as rejection, but as realignment. No to roles that don't fit. No to conversations that leave you hollow. No to people who only call when they're hungry for attention. But liberation is not just about escape. It's about returning to the self, the essence, the deep well of truth that never needed to be drained in the first place. Jung's idea of individuation is exactly this, the process of becoming who you truly are by integrating all parts of yourself, including the ones you gave away to feel accepted. When you reclaim those parts, your voice, your anger, your joy, your dreams, you stop leaking energy trying to maintain a false peace. You start living from the inside out. And then something incredible happens. You begin to attract different people. Not because you've changed your circle, but because you've changed your frequency. People who benefited from your self-abandonment will fall away not out of malice, but because they no longer recognize you. And those who resonate with your authentic self will appear not because you went searching for them, but because they were waiting for you to come home to yourself. So ask yourself the question that changes everything. If I stop trying to be who others want me to be, who would I have the energy to become? That question holds the key to your liberation. Because the truth is, nobody can drain you when you stop giving them access to parts of you they haven't earned. Nobody can hold you hostage when you've freed yourself from the need to be understood. And nobody can diminish you when you've decided that your light is not up for negotiation. You don't owe anyone your exhaustion. You owe yourself your wholeness. And when you walk in that wholeness, rooted in truth, lit by your own inner fire, that's when the draining stops. That's when the healing begins. That's when you finally remember you were never meant to be anyone's power source. You were meant to be your own. If this helped you reclaim even 1% of your energy, share it with someone who needs to wake up from the drain. And remember, the real work starts within.